Capitalism is the best solution to global poverty. The most important pro-capitalism argument is that capitalism is the best economic system for alleviating poverty. Before the dawn of capitalism, roughly 200 years ago, 90% of the global population was living in extreme poverty. Today, that figure has fallen to just 10%. And it's particularly interesting that half of this decline has occurred over the last 35 years, as Steven Pinker demonstrates in his impressive book Enlightenment Now. And these are precisely the same 35 years in which, according to the leftist French economist Thomas Piketty, global inequality has surged. Above all, anti-capitalists complain that the rich are becoming even richer and that there are more and more billionaires. Indeed, the number of billionaires has risen sharply over the past 30 years. In the year 2000, there were only 470 billionaires in the world. Today, there are 2,200 according to Forbes. What capitalism's critics fail to acknowledge is that the increase in the number of billionaires around the world and the decrease in the number of people living in poverty are two sides of the same coin: capitalist globalization. Whenever anyone asks what triggered the incredible turnaround in the fight against global poverty, then I have a simple answer: the death of Mao Zedong on 9th September 1976. As late as the end of the 50s, 45 million people died as a result of Mao's Great Leap Forward experiment in China. I speak on the subject all over the world, and whenever I ask my audiences about the human costs of Mao's socialist revolution, I find that hardly anyone has heard about it in school. Young people have heard a lot about the evils of capitalism, but they've not been told about the evils of socialism. At no other point in history have so many people escaped bitter poverty in such a short time as in China. According to official World Bank figures, the percentage of extremely poor people in China in 1981 stood at 88%. By 1990, this had fallen to 66%. And by 2015, less than 1% of the Chinese population was living in extreme poverty. The Chinese economic miracle began with Deng Xiaoping's economic reforms. It was Deng who declared, "Let some people get rich first." Over the next few decades, the Chinese state permitted the private ownership of the means of production and allowed the free market to exert greater influence. In spite of the fact that the state still exerts a strong grip on the Chinese economy, it has substantially reduced its role since the period under Mao Zedong. And under Deng, capitalist special economic zones were created all across China. Under Mao, China was not home to a single billionaire. By 2010, however, the number had risen to 64, thanks to Deng's capitalist reforms. Today, there are 400 billionaires in China, and in no other country in the world, except for the United States, has so many billionaires as China. All anti-capitalists subscribe to the same creed. There are zero-sum believers, and they are convinced that the poor are only poor because the rich have taken something from them. If this zero-sum theory were correct, recent developments would be impossible. But zero-sum beliefs are wrong. The sharp decline in poverty and the dramatic increase in the number of billionaires go entirely hand in hand. Perhaps it is surprising to take the example of China to prove the superiority of capitalism. Is China even a capitalist country? Doesn't the state still play a huge role in all areas of life in China? Of course, China is far from being a purely capitalist country. The state still exercises far too much control for that to be the case. But all the progress in China over the past 40 years is due entirely to the fact that the Chinese have progressively introduced the principles of free markets and private property ownership, more capitalism. On a visit to China, I spoke to the economist Zhang Weiying, and he couldn't have been clearer. China's economic miracle did not happen because of the state, but in spite of the state. Capitalism is not the problem, it's a solution, especially when it comes to fight against hunger and poverty around the world. Every year, the Heritage Foundation publishes the Index of Economic Freedom, which ranks every country in the world to measure the progress of economic freedom around the globe. Year after year, the ranking proves that no one goes hungry in the countries with the greatest economic freedom. In stark contrast, economic repression only ever leads to hunger and poverty, as we have just seen again in Venezuela, where more than 10% of the population have already fled to escape starvation under the country's socialist regime. You can find more information about this topic in my book, The Power of Capitalism.